For those whom I have yet to meet, I want to introduce myself. My name is John Simon, and I have recently had the honor to be appointed chair of the Senior Pediatric Ophthalmology Group at AAPOS. When I first learned of this appointment, I really had no idea what I should do as the leader of this group. So I sought advice from Kathy Lee, our president, and Christy Morse, our executive vice president. And I sent them some preliminary ruminations of what I think are important factors as we approach and enter retirement. I think we all want a secure, financially secure, and healthy retirement. And I remember Al Bigland's symposium several years ago when he had two very cogent pieces of advice. He said, don't retire from something, retire to something. His second piece of advice was, keep your first wife. So my story began about a year ago when I started to cut back my practice. I gave up surgery. I'm now 71 years old, and I'm practicing just one day a week. We moved to what had been our second home. We no longer have a home in Albany. We live in our home on a lake in the Adirondacks, about an hour and a half north of Albany. Here, over the summer, we are hosting our two children, their spouses, and our 7 grandchildren, ranging in age from 2 to 11. We do summer activities at the lake, we have a boat, and we have done a good bit of homeschooling with the schools out. But my retirement job, even before the kids came, was cooking for a homeless shelter. It turns out that cooking is really my favorite activity. The story begins in college when I discovered that I simply enjoyed the self-expression. I also enjoyed good food, and I found even better food in fancy restaurants in New York City. And I had the opportunity to cross the Atlantic on one of the very last crossings of the SS France. Craig Claiborne, who was then the food critic for the New York Times, said that the first-class restaurant on that ship was simply the best restaurant in the world. I don't know how anybody can make that claim, but I will say that the food was like nothing I've had before or since. I also found that I got a fair amount of mileage with the ladies when I'd prepare dinner for them. Fortunately, my wife of 42 years agreed, and I caught her with a roast chicken with chicken liver stuffing and Normandy cream sauce. She has not cooked a meal in our 42 years together. I would like to share some recipes with you. The first one actually is kind of multifaceted in the sense that you cook the stock and then you can make from it a variety of sauces that can be frozen. I will share some philosophy about how to plan menus, how to minimize waste and minimize return trips to the grocery store when we all want to be home for safety. And I would appeal to you all, please share your feedback, share your own recipes, share any other thoughts you have that might be pertinent. Perhaps you're into financial planning, for example. It's something I know nothing about. I would be honored to include your input in whatever future programs we can make of this. Thank you. Our recipe for today is beef stock. And from the beef stock, we will make a demi-glace, which is a fundamental from which you can construct other sauces for red meats. In terms of equipment, you'll need to have 2 large roasting racks and 2 stock pots, which I'll show you in a moment. For ingredients, we'll need to have 14 marrow bones cut in 3 or 4-inch segments, a pound of carrots, washed, not necessarily peeled, a pound of celery stalks, cut in half or so, 2 pounds of onions, quartered, not necessarily peeled, and a bunch of leeks, which are chopped coarsely. Leeks are a very filthy vegetable, so you have to wash it thoroughly in several changes of water. Bay leaves, thyme, unpeeled garlic cloves, and eventually we'll come to tomato paste. Now to begin, we will preheat the oven to 450 degrees. We will scatter the bones and all the vegetables except for the leeks in the 2 baking racks. I'm going to go and put the racks in the oven. And I will set the timer for an hour. Every 15 minutes or so, I'll take some tongs and rotate the bones and the vegetables to keep them from being scorched. In the meantime, I will cut the leeks into 1-inch or so segments after I quarter them to make it easier to wash the sand out of them. Now, a couple of thoughts come to mind. First of all, it's not necessary to include the very green ends. It's probably better not to, because most of the flavor's in the whiter part, but just a little bit of the pale green. The second thing is, it's good to have a sharp knife for this kind of work. I have a knife sharpener right next to me on the counter, circa 1965 or something, and it still works. I suppose I will have to replace it. When you wash the leeks, they're just full of sand. So the secret is to take them out of a great deal of water, great quantity of water. Don't let the water drain out because that will not effectively get the sand away from the vegetable. So take that out. Drain the sandy water down the drain. Sometimes it helps to hit it with the garbage disposal. Then rinse that sand out of the bottom of the sink and do it again. And maybe even do it a third time. One time I had a colleague who was washing vegetables and she put dishwashing detergent into the water. And I thought that was about the craziest idea I've ever seen, but I have to admit, it worked. I have not indulged in that method, which seems a little bit crazy to me, even now. You will see, if you examine the leeks themselves, that there is really quite a bit of sand in between the leeks. Now, I have here two large stock pots. And they have to be full of water. Take something out of this one. We really do cook here. And I'm going to put water into these stock pots. About, I would say, half full, maybe a third full. That will allow me to get a faster start on cooking the leeks, which do not go in the oven with the onions and carrots and celery and bones. And I'm using two stock pots because it's a whole lot easier to manipulate their contents, especially later on when it gets real hot. I think this is a good time for a break. The bones and vegetables have been in the oven for about 15 minutes, and I am going now to turn the bones and prepare some herbs and seasonings for the stock. And by the way, it is very hot in this kitchen. You can see that the bones have started to brown, especially on the bottom, and the vegetables will do the same. So keep them turned a little bit. You don't have to do it every 10 minutes, but you should do it a couple of times at least during the hour so that you don't get asymmetric char. Our bones and vegetables have been in the oven for about an hour, and I am now going to take those and place them into the water in which the leeks have been boiling. You will see that the carrots are very soft. You can stick them and they'll almost mash. And the whole process of making a stock is to create a water extract of food You can have vegetable stock, you can have fish stock, shrimp stock. In general, bones and shells and skin, scraps of any sort, which would not really be suitable for consumption directly, the best source of flavor for a stock. I remember one time back in my college days, I had it in mind that the way to make something really flavorful is to boil it, gently simmering it over a long period of time. And I was making some piece of meat and it just got more and more bland. And I could not understand why that would be, because I had it in mind that that would be a way to impart flavor. Where was the flavor? It had gone into the water. And of course, once you have made a stock, you can make it much more flavorful by boiling it down to concentrated flavors. Do not put salt in the stock until the last minute. That's a big mistake. You can't take it out. Oh, the one other thing I have not yet done. Here are parsley, and here is thyme, and here are bay leaves. So I'm going to take about half of these and put each in each of these two pots. Now there's a French technique called a Bouquet Garni. And basically what you do is take a piece of cheesecloth and wrap these vegetables or these spices into it, and then tie it and drop it in maybe with a string to attach it to a handle. You don't have to do that in this technique because we're going to strain the stock at the end anyway. Here is a garlic clove. I'm going to mash it, and it will cooperate and come apart. Now again, because we're going to strain, we don't need to peel the vegetables like the onions, carrots, and we don't even have to peel the garlics. This stock is going to cook for many hours, overnight typically, and therefore all of the flavor will go right through the peeling. We'll be back for another installment. Thank you. I will pour the last remaining juices, which are really basically fat, into the pots now. The fat will be skimmed away later on, but it does have flavor which I'd like to impart to the stock. Now I will fill these pots nearly to the top and let them simmer very slowly, partly covered, overnight, 6-8 hours, and then we'll proceed to strain and defat the stock at that time. The stock has cooled for several hours and the fat has congealed on the top. So I will very easily lift off the fat with a spatula and discard it. I will then concentrate the stock and proceed with the recipe for demi-glace. Yesterday, I defatted the stock, and it's been boiling to concentrate for several hours. It is now time to take the whole process to the next step, which is to make demi-glace. A more modern version of demi-glace, which is quite similar but perhaps a little easier, is called jus lié. What I've done is I have taken equal parts of flour and butter, and I have cooked them together in this Dutch oven. And you can tell that the mixture has begun to turn the color of peanut butter. When that happens, you really need to keep stirring and put some kind of ingredient in there pretty quickly so that it won't burn. So I have here some bacon chopped up, and you will see that it will now render some more fat. And when it does, it will become juicy enough so that I can saute some aromatic vegetables. And over here on the cutting board, I have equal parts chopped onions, chopped celery, and chopped carrots. I will put them in once the fat from the bacon has begun to render, and then I will cook that mixture until basically the vegetables are softened and the ham or bacon, whatever you're using, becomes flavorful and has rendered whatever fat it has to offer. At that point, I'm going to put some tomato paste into this mixture and cook it so that it loses that sharp flavor the tomato paste has. And I will put stock in that will be thickened by the roux. I want to save some of the stock to use for other purposes, and I will perhaps, quite likely in fact, want to put some of that stock also into this demi-glace mixture. So let's wait until the process proceeds a little bit, and I will probably also be adding some aromatic herbs. Bacon has to get crisp. You can see that the whole mixture is starting to get a little bit browner. You don't want to burn anything. Just keep stirring. Patiently, constantly. Now it's getting juicier and doesn't stick on the bottom as much. The brown roux has a very much enhanced flavor compared to just flour and butter, flour and oil that's not been cooked together. But it has about half the thickening power of a blonde roux. Now I'm sensing that the roux itself is starting to get a little darker. I really don't want it to burn, so I'm going to put the vegetables in. I start by sauteing them, and then I'll put in the tomato paste. I have put the tomato paste into the mixture so that it can cook, and in another few moments I'm going to put some boiling stock in as well. In fact, I think we're ready to do that right now. So here's the stock. And it's going to make a big noise. And this is going to become thick and very flavorful. I will drop another couple of cloves of garlic in it, and some thyme, and a bay leaf, and some parsley, similar to the herbs I used before. And it's all going to become be strained, so that those and these vegetables and the chunks of bacon will be removed. This needs to simmer at a very low temperature, and you don't need to stand over it, but you gotta make sure that it's not going to boil down too fast. We'll be back for the next chapter. So we have finished making our stock. We have strained and defatted it and turned it into a demi-glace. The demi-glace is in this pot, and the question now is, what are we going to do with it? We're going to turn it into braised short ribs served with penne and Parmesan cheese. So the pot right here has boiling salted water. I'm going to pour a pound of penne into that pot. This pot has the demi-glace, and I've already braised in the stock these beef short ribs. I'm going to simply place these in here, one at a time. I don't need to use all of them, I can freeze them, but I'm going to probably use most of them because I have a big family gathering for Saturday lunch. We're going to serve the short ribs over the penne pasta, and we're going to accompany with a vegetable, in this case asparagus, and corn on the cob because it's summertime in the Adirondacks. We have to have corn for just about every meal. These short ribs have been cooked, and all we have to do is to reheat them in the demi-glace so they'll absorb the flavors. And in a matter of about 10 minutes, I hope to be able to show you the dish. See you soon. And finally, it appears that dinner is almost ready. I will go to the stove and hopefully find asparagus that has been roasting with a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper. By the way, when I have asparagus and I don't know exactly where to cut it because some are thick and woody and some are more tender stems, I just grab near the bottom and break it. It's sort of a shortcut, but you can see that will come off at perhaps a slightly different level. And we have a pair of tongs somewhere that I will use to toss this one time. Find that it's still a little bit al dente, and I will pop it back in the oven for another 5 minutes while I get everything else out. Here are our short ribs, which have been in the oven, and they have become moistened by the steam as well as by the demi-glace in the bottom of the pot. I like the idea of letting them go for another few minutes while I plate the corn and the pasta. So let me just stir these a little bit, trying to make sure that they all get a sampling of the liquid at the bottom. Fine. And now, let's put these back in the oven for the last few minutes. I like to set a timer. So it's on 10 minutes. I think that's about right. The corn really only needs to be boiled It is just coming to a boil. Once it boils, I'll turn it off. And here's our penne tossed with a little bit of the demi-glace, a little butter, and some Parmesan cheese. We will serve all hopefully at the same time. Thank you for your kind attention. I would be very happy to answer any email inquiries that you might have. SimonJ@amc.edu.